notes in
Okay.
Michael's absence.
Great, thank you. And Mike Backen won't be here either. I'm not sure if Stephen is going to make it. No minutes. Those will be coming next meeting. Any additional responses from various committees or boards that you visited?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I went to the cemetery. I don't have much, but I went to the cemetery committee meeting on November 30th, and they do have changes they want to propose, but they wanted to know what our process will be. Like, oops, I'm not quite sure. I need to come back and ask you guys, and then I'll get back. They wanted to meet with us probably in January, so I told them the dates, 10 and the 24th. So they wanted to know what the process was. They wanted to know, do they come to us, present their proposal, then do we vote on it? And they said, if we say, no, we don't want that change to be made, then what would they do? Would they appeal it to the selectmen? And, how would that work? Because I thought they would come to, we were in charge of thinking if we were proposing any changes. And then do we ultimately, do we present that to the selectmen and then the selectmen present it at the town meeting? Or do we present that at the town meeting? I wasn't sure really of the format.
So we'll have plenty of hearings with presenting to the selectmen, but we would be reporting to town meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not entirely sure whether town meeting, my understanding town meeting is either a yes or no vote.
That's the impression I'm working on.
And you would say yes or no to everything?
Yeah.
As opposed to when we did bylaw, it was bit by bit.
Right.
Okay.
But you think with this one, it would be all or nothing?
I think they want it to be harder to change.
Yeah.
Is that how I understood the
So
term?
we will find out from town council. I will ask town council specifically the procedure, because it didn't form through a charter vote. But that's traditionally what's happened, is that we as the commission vote to do what we recommend, and then that goes for approval by the town, and it's always been a yes or no vote. The town does not get a chance to
Oh,
do that.
okay.
I believe that is true, and just to remind folks, we did agree on a super majority, so 2/3
Right.
this body.
And that's what's required at town meeting as well, right?
Because it's required at town meeting,
Right.
we're required to vote on that.
So if they come to us and make a proposal, and we as a group, then we would vote, and if we said, no, we don't think that change needs to be made, what is their recourse? Would they then,
So there really wouldn't be any recourse.
could they at some point put a warrant on? I don't...
I mean, you could always have a warrant article to, I guess you could always petition the legislature to vote to do something different, but that would require the town to do that. So we'll ask about what's the formal process. Did they give you any idea of what things they're proposing?
No, they did not. They just wanted to know the procedure. And I didn't want to ask people without us all being together. I don't want to just call them and ask. Violate open meeting, so. But Steve and I will get back to them, tell them, I will get back and tell them. So that I'm clear, the procedure is they can come and meet with us, make a proposal. We then, as a group, vote on that up or down? And is it-
Not necessarily at that point, but
Okay.
it'd be a 2/3 vote of the
Okay.
entire commission, not of those present. And the goal was, if you could communicate to them, that it'd be really important for them to give their reasoning behind why it's going to be, because that would be helpful.
Right, well, certainly when they...
Well, I think the other thing, and I don't know, maybe this can feed into that, is that when I met with the library committee, the board of trustees, what they're going to do is put their language, the language of their changes in writing and submit that, and then maybe we can talk about it before having it, because it may be that there's not an issue. So say, for example, with the library board of trustees, it started out, 3.1 is fine, we don't have any problems with 3-1, but when you get to 3-7, the language is rough. The language isn't necessarily clear, so it's like, so we'll appoint, the Board of Trustees will appoint the Director of Library Services, who will be, and then what they'd rather do is say that the Director of Library Services will, and list out all of the duties, rather than have it be a subset. And then another portion of it they struck because one of the comments was responsibility for the ordinary maintenance of library buildings will be transferred. That's been done. Strike it. So, it's things like that. So if that's the same thing with the cemetery
I don't have any...
commission, it may be that, it may not even be necessary. It may just be cleaning up stuff.
So just a quick reaction to that.
Yeah.
Before we strike it, we may want to decide to include it as something that has already transpired. Responsibility for the maintenance of the buildings has been turned over to DPW.
To acknowledge it, as opposed to traditionally libraries are under the, including the buildings, are under the jurisdiction of library trustees, so.
So so make a
Be
comment
clear
rather than,
that we've moved it.
yeah,
Not
rather
that it
than
will be
omit it.
moved, that it has been moved.
Right, yeah, responsibility for the buildings and property has transferred to, or is under the, okay. Because the other was for them, and again, it goes down to appointments and employees and things like that, is that, all right, so they have the capacity to appoint all other officers and employees connected with the library system, but they really don't, because it's also part, they'll say that they want to say the library director makes those appointments, but if there is a conflict between the director and staff, where does that go? And because currently they don't have a role, so there's that they would go through town. And so that just, they want to, and they were basically referring back to when there was, like years ago, a problem between, and that they didn't see where they're...
And that may be before the employees, except for the director, were unionized too. So that may be, some of that may have changed. I'm not sure when the library employees were unionized.
Right, but whatever happened, it was just like the library, because the Board of Trustees sees themselves as, okay, they want to clean the language up so that it identifies the library director as being responsible for all of these things, and that they're doing oversight, and they set the policy and the direction. It's just what role do they have, or should they have, in any kind of disciplinary issues.
Okay.
And then they did want to maybe...
Just on that point, it might be good if you could touch base with Heather, the town manager, regarding that, because there may be a procedure that's stated. It may be as simple as that the disciplinary actions will follow the requirements of collective bargaining agreements or whatever the state is.
Yeah, I know that it refers to collective bargaining in terms of appointments and things like that within the body of the charter.
Well, one of the major issues we said we wanted to review was the whole relationship between employees that work specifically for a committee. And I don't know if library is going to be considered different for any reason, but I think that's part of it.
Right, I think part of it is that it's the director that does, so are they asking what their role is?
Well, I think it came up as part of the discussion because really they don't know what's going on in the day-to-day functioning of the library. So if an employee does have an issue with the director, where do they go?
I see. Right, so that is consistent with all of our elected boards and committees that have employees, so that'll be an important part to resolve.
And then they did also talk about, like wanting to create language where it said that, like the Board of Trustees and the library director would act as partners, or have a partnership, but I was like, well, yeah, but you also hire and fire, so you're not really partners, so that, but they walked back off of that in terms of when he presented. But Dick Mayu is going to be, cleaning up the language and submitting that, so that we can look at it more. But it was an interesting discussion, and those were some of the concerns were around the employee issues.
And given people's input and when it needs to be sort of, I keep thinking that town meeting's really soon.
Well, this
You'll
That
find ways on
to work from when the date will be and start to set deadlines, because everything we do has to be complete, reviewed, and so I feel like that's really soon, like March maybe, which is like in a couple months. And so I'm starting to feel like setting some sort of concrete plan.
To figure out whether we're going to make it or not.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure we have a good product. And I was thinking about it, it's like, okay, I know I've not been able to do what I wanted to do because of my work commitments, but at the same time, we want to make sure we have a good product and we have a public process as well, not only individually with these boards, but...
How long can this committee last for, and when does it have to be done by? I remember, isn't there some sort of,
I think we were appointed, we didn't give to report at the May 2018 town meeting. It didn't say that. We were appointed as a charter review committee.
I had thought about it, and I was thinking a fall special meeting might work out awesome because we would be done by the spring, summer to educate, the fall to finalize, and a special town meeting generally only has a few warrants, whereas the spring town meeting is very heavily docketed. So my thought, you mentioned it at the last meeting, I went, ooh, and then I went, you know what? So we're not rushing into it.
Yeah, it feels like
And then
we're
we
out of
can spend
time.
the entire summer
We are,
educating people and having whatever questions. So when it does come up, it can come up and be a viable discussion and then voted on without the budget stuff and
I
everything that
agree.
gets crammed into the regular town meeting.
There's a lot of good things to edit that will improve
much as I-
functioning and everything.
Yeah, and there's no reason why we couldn't.
We can meet all year.
Much like we do the budget hearings, to have commissions come to, and just televise it like we do with the budget hearings for the departments.
Right.
The other thing would be is that we could ask for an article at the annual town meeting to report out on the progress. That'd be another opportunity to do
That
so.
would be a nice
An outreach.
5-minute thing.
Yeah, and that way everybody gets a heads up that there's a fall meeting.
Good debate.
Well, there probably will be a fall.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, but it's also, yeah.
But if we're the only thing on the agenda,
That's right.
And they'll
Sweet.
still
That would
have
be
to be
awesome.
special, because we wouldn't have a
That's right, we
documentary
wouldn't have it
charter.
done yet. It'll still be special. That's right.
So the process is, do we present it to the Board of Selectmen? Do they have any input on what we do, or we just present it at the town meeting?
The committee is established under the charter, so it's actually not a Board of Selectmen committee, but we would want to report to them, just
Would
because
they then-
it's another
okay.
forum.
Would they be able to alter it? That's what do they ask
No,
those
it's still,
questions?
it's the charter
It's
commission.
really us,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's,
I would
well,
assume
they
that
wanted
the...
to know, then what, if we say no,
Yeah.
then what do they do? What's their recourse? And
I would assume that
there must be
because
something.
it's going to be voted at a town meeting, whether it be the annual or the special, they're going to want a recommendation from both the finance and the selectmen, so there's got to be an opportunity for that. Now, they could come to one of our public hearings, or we could go to them, but either way,
Yeah.
there's got to be a piece in there where they either recommend or not. I don't think they have approval authority.
You mean the Board of Selectmen?
And the finance
Yeah,
committee.
the finance committee,
Okay.
yeah, right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'll report out on, I attended the last sewer commission meeting, and, because I realized that was one that I think I had taken that we didn't assign to anybody else. And I asked them to look at the language. They asked when, and I said January would be good. The important part on that one is that the charter for sewer, I think, predated the current sewer use plan, because the charter provides that the sewer commission shall come up with plans to sewer the entire town. Doesn't say it exactly that, but effectively is that. And there was a change by town meeting, and some of the environmental part is to sewer the areas that could not support traditional on-site systems. So they're going to be looking at whether that language should be changed on that as well. Any other committees?
Yes. I met with the Parks Commission last week. I outlined the process for them. We had a little bit of discussion. I did raise the one point that boards that have employees might be a consideration, and they were all very clear, they do not have employees. All the employees work for DPW. So
Including the beach
it's
staff?
all DPW. Nobody reports directly to the Parks Commission. They were pretty clear about that.
I hate to bring this up then, because the band concerts are the only line item in the parks. It's one of the line items, I believe, in the Parks Department budget.
Just because it's a line item in the budget doesn't mean they have employees
Okay.
that report to them.
Yeah, the finance committee has a $500 budget that,
All right, I just wanted, because I'm, obviously I'm part of that, I want to make sure we're just clear. So I'm not an employee.
I don't know whether you're an employee
Do they-
or not, but you don't...
Do all the band members get paid by the town out of the town band
Do you get paid on a 1099 or a W-2?
It's probably going to be a 1099 eventually. It hasn't been.
But you're paid by the town?
The town pays into the town band account, and that account is separate from the town, then that account pays. That's changing next year. It's going to all go through the town, I guess.
Okay.
Are the band concerts in the charter at all? I don't believe so.
No.
So I don't think that would...
I just want to make sure, so there's no conflict, so someone doesn't say,
Yeah.
why...
Traditionally, you wouldn't be considered an employee because they don't really have, the town doesn't direct you how to do your job or provide you a telephone or a desk or other things like that. You wouldn't, the interesting question is that if you fell down at the band concert, whether you'd be covered by workers' compensation. And I would assume not. But that might want to be clarified with the insurance part. So.
I also heard from the trust fund commissioners. The only question they had heard that there may be a move to make them appointed rather than elected. But they also believe that they're elected by statute. So that's something we may want to check. I'm not aware of any movement to make them appointed, but they seem to think there was some history there.
It could be history, but I don't know it.
And then the Board of Health met last week, last Monday. I know this was on their agenda. Unfortunately, I did not attend their meeting. And I know Dave was...
I didn't make that meeting.
...was tied up elsewhere. But I did reach out to George and remind him that if they have any input, we're anxious to hear about that.
And it may just be that, and again, I would just go back to, is there any reason why we couldn't just ask them to submit anything in writing so that we could just go through it?
If they have any.
Yeah.
So,
They may not.
Yeah.
I gave a pretty good read of the charter. There's the one section outlining their responsibility. Not much else beyond that.
Okay.
and then tomorrow night, the Finance Committee will be reviewing the budget development and the Finance Committee stuff.
Great.
And Heather is going to Heather and Karen should be prepared to discuss the budget development piece. So.
Yeah, that one seems like we've moved a long way from when the original charter was created and positions and other things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what you come up with for the meeting.
She's already talking about being ready to do the 5-year forecast, so it's time to start to put on the budget hat.
Actually, the forecast is usually before the end of the calendar year, so...
Yeah. So she's looking at the January dates.
Council on Aging is okay. The only mention in the charter is their membership, and they're okay with that. Personnel Committee I have not gotten to yet, but I know that there's even though that's covered under this salary administration plan, which I believe is in the bylaw, not the charter, I know the town manager has some ideas on that. And then finally, at the last meeting, we agreed that the town manager was going to come in January. I forget which of the dates we agreed on, but she was going to cover both Section 4 she's going to help us cover Section 4 town manager and this whole employee thing. We may ask her about the Personnel Committee while she's here.
Can I ask you, I know you have a copy of Tim Murphy's. This last paragraph brings up the town manager and grievance and stuff, so make sure she sees that. Does that make sense to you?
Remove
Yeah,
the town
yeah.
manager.
Make sure she sees that, because it's obviously something that probably needs to be cleaned up.
Right.
It's been interesting. Various people, as a result of sending the charter out, have obviously read the charter and are pointing things out about what we're doing right or not in the charter. So I think just because we've done it, it's been really educational for a lot of people, so I'm very happy that that process is going on. And it's clear to me that it's a pretty good document, but it needs some work, regardless of substantive part, just plain language, consistency, and other stuff like that. And anyone over the years when I used to work for the state and we did grants, we always told people when you're done writing the grant, turn it over to your favorite English teacher to make sure that it's written properly, parallel language, all the correct things. So if somebody's on the committee that's willing to do that, or we want to find another resource to do that at the end, say, all right, we know what we meant. Does it say what we meant at the end? So that'll be something we'll want to try to do as well.
I know a fabulous English teacher that can edit, like, you don't even know you used the wrong semicolon, that, yeah.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Good.
I'd be happy to submit it to her.
That would be important to do.
Yeah, I will say that the other thing that's been helpful was, I sent out aside from the public access cable, to put on their website, and it's going to start showing the town meeting video. And then because I was at the library committee, or board of trustees, they're going to post the searchable charter and bylaws on the library website. I had to just send them the link, so good. Of course, I thought, because I just think it's so cool that you can just search stuff. So yeah, so it's been educational for me. It's been educational for people on the committee. And more information hopefully is getting out there.
So did we complete Article 3? I remember we need to get to a certain point to go over school. That's the different departments. So I think we were going to hold on any individual one until we got all the reports. Article 4 is the town manager, and we're going to hold on that. And then Department of Finance and Financial Services, you're going to be covering that too, so then we're not going to go over that.
I have a question about Article 4, because I've seen it on the agenda, so I spent a lot of time on it. And I didn't know if we'd be more prepared to meet with her if we do talk about it a little bit.
Wouldn't hurt to just go through it, just to understand what it is.
Because from a charter perspective, it has more to do with the town and with us than it even does with her, in the sense that we haven't invited everybody else in to analyze their, like we've talked about land use without the land use director. So I wasn't sure how that plays into just our own collective thoughts being prepared to
Sure.
talk with her about it.
If we can certainly go through it and see if anyone has any comments or questions. So, Article 4, Town Manager, Section 1, Appointment. Town Manager shall be responsible for coordination and direction of all administrative and financial affairs of the town. Appointed by the Board of Selectmen from the list submitted by a Town Manager Screening Committee, which consists of a member of the Board of Selectmen designated by it, a member of the School Committee designated by it, a member of the Planning Board designated by it, a member of the Finance Committee designated by it, and the Town Moderator, who shall serve as the chair.
Did the town moderator include this in his email to suggest having somebody at large, or am I thinking of something else? I don't have his email with me.
I do have it.
Yes.
I believe he did.
That he had thought of adding.
Should appoint one citizen at large to the screening committee for replacing the town manager.
So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you did that, you'd end up having a committee of 6, and you always want to have an uneven number.
So would you have 2 at large?
2 at large. Appointed by, did he come up with a recommendation?
Him.
The appointment by moderator, okay.
Yes, oh, so I'm reading everything but the first sentence. Sorry about that.
So then it goes through the process of calling meetings, convene, solicit candidates, review applications. And the selectmen shall appoint a town manager only from the list so prepared and submitted to it. So it's a typical review process. As I go through it, just say if you've got one
Sure, I'm looking
discussion.
at the appointment thing that we just did, and thinking of it in the sense, the town moderator would be on it and then appoint 2 more. Feels like a lot coming from one direction.
Yep.
And I'm thinking of how this one was formed, in which people could choose people that didn't have to be a member, and I think that was really neat the way it all worked out. But that's also a neat way to make a committee that maybe more would come from these specific sources, but they wouldn't have to necessarily be a member. So if the school committee did two, much how this one was formed, just as sort of an opposite, I'm just feeling like three votes coming from one person is a lot.
What if it were one from the moderator, one at large from the moderator, or one at large from the board, select board?
Yeah, that would be more...
Something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like it needs to be.
Okay. Qualifications of town manager, a person is specially fitted by education, training, previous experience.
Just before we pass on, I'm sitting on, just thinking through, we just went through the hiring of a town manager. And it's a difficult process to hire by committee. It really is, to go through resumes and do interviews, and not the least of which is the scheduling, but then just interviewing and doing it it's difficult, and by going and moving from 5 to 7 people makes it more difficult. I'm not sure I have a good solution. I just want to make sure.
I would kind of concur, having
Yeah.
also been a member of that committee. It's tough to schedule 5, let alone 7. Getting a quorum, I guess.
And getting enough agreement to move to a second interview, and
Yeah.
it gets tough.
And in hindsight, I think we ended up with a very good town manager. But as we went through the process, it wasn't clear that was going to be the recommended candidate.
Right.
That she was going to be the recommended candidate.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. And if you had 7 people, it would have been even harder to come to consensus on that.
We can come back to that.
I mean, these are all proposed.
Yeah.
What I'm planning to do is take whatever we've already proposed, not agreed to, because we've not taken any votes, but to actually put them into one document and show a red line version, and show what are the possibilities that we can actually do, and we can come back to that.
Did he happen to say why he thought there should be an at-large member?
said it was a
As the
closed...
committee is currently constituted, it is a closed group of elected appointed members of boards and committees. We need to increase our volunteer base, and this would create another opportunity for community involvement.
That makes sense.
He said a lot.
Because I wonder if the language could just be that, that these 5 would have to participate, but the town moderator could have the option of appointing 2.
You really want to have it
Clear in the charter,
Yeah.
okay.
It becomes pretty complicated. It doesn't necessarily help anything by having 2 extra people if there's not a clear reason why they're there.
Yeah. We can certainly have more discussion with
And-
the town manager.
Everyone's elected except Finance Committee, so it's 4 elected and 1 appointed.
So the selectmen shall appoint the town manager to serve for an indefinite term, fix the compensation annually within the amount appropriated by the town. So to fix the compensation annually, we actually enter into a contract that may have the compensation set more than once a year.
Well, the contract actually sets one compensation and says we'll look at it every year, so it doesn't really...
That's the current contract.
Right.
There could be another one that you'd have for 3.
Right.
We may want to put in at least annually,
What's at least annually?
setting the salary compensation at least annually, which means that you could set the salary over the next 3 years.
Well, on that same sentence, we say we do it for an indefinite term, which when we set a contract, it's a definite term.
Indefinite term, but the compensation is set annually.
You can stay for a long time, I just pay you for 1 year.
That's right, there you go. So we'll come back and look at that. basis of demonstrated executive administrative qualifications with special emphasis on financial matters. So when the charter was first established, it was the attempt to try to get a handle on finance because we were moving from, and at that time it was elected treasurer, collector, newly accountant, other things like that. So there was the focus mostly on financial matters. There's been discussion back and forth about whether that should be pulled back. In the most recent part, it was pushed to say finance is still very important to have, so just raise it as a point. Contract, selectmen enter into a contract to cover wages, hours, benefits, other conditions of employment, but no such contract shall be deemed to prevent the removal of the town manager by majority vote of the full board of selectmen.
I just have a little question there, it's just more of a question. A majority vote of the full board would be the same as a majority vote of 4. So how's it different?
So
I
what
mean,
this
not necessarily just to hear, but...
Yeah, so what this is trying to say is that it's not the majority vote of the people at a meeting. So you could have a quorum of 3, and the majority vote would be 2. So
Oh.
this is why we need to clarify this throughout the process, is that quorum, majority vote, you're allowed to have 2 out of the 3 there take business. But for removing, they want to have majority vote of the full board of selectmen.
Okay, if you had a vacant spot, so there's just 4 and you're operating with 4 for a while for whatever reason, how does that play, is that legally your majority is 4?
No, your majority is still 3.
Majority is still 3.
No, I mean,
Your full board
is your
at
full
one
board
time is
legally 4?
Yes.
Okay,
Right, legally 4, but the majority vote still would be,
so what you're looking for is to always need 3?
yeah.
Okay.
No?
What you're looking for is for them to not try to schedule a meeting on a night that somebody can't go.
Right.
In the dark of night.
Right.
Town manager need not be a resident of the town or the Commonwealth, shall not have served in an elective or appointed office in the town government for at least 12 months prior to appointment. Town may establish from time to time by bylaw additional qualifications. So some towns have required the town manager to be in the town, and then they often go for an exemption because of the person's circumstances. The town decided to give that flexibility. And then the second sentence about not being elected and appointed is so that somebody doesn't have an inside track. And if you really wanted to work that system and you had this conspiracy process, you would just have an interim town manager for a certain period of time and give people time to not serve in office.
And when it says in the town government, by the, it means our,
Yes.
Lunenburg. So if you were from somewhere else, you could have been in their government.
Yep. Devote full time to the office, not shall hold any public office, elected or appointed, nor engage in any other business occupation unless such action is approved in advance and in writing by the Board of Selectmen.
Well, I would assume that, elective, they're talking about in another town. Elective or appointed in another town, because they couldn't in this town anyway, because they'd be violating the conflict of interest. Which I don't know if we need to reference the change in the ethics and...
I mean, this would cover any other public office, whether in town or outside. But that's a good point.
I would think it would be difficult to hold a position even in a different town, given the responsibilities of the town manager.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I wouldn't
I
do
think
it.
this language is fine.
I agree.
Selectmen shall provide for an annual review of the job performance and which shall, at least in summary form, be a public record. Any vacancy in the office shall be filled as soon as possible by the screening committee and the Board of Selectmen. Selectmen shall appoint a qualified town administrative officer or employee as a temporary town manager to perform the duties until a new town manager is appointed.
Is there any language about an interim?
Yeah, next
That's
sentence.
later.
Next
Okay.
sentence.
Such temporary appointment may not exceed 3 months, but one additional renewal may be voted by the Board of Selectmen not to exceed a second 3 months.
I wrote here the possibility of saying not to exceed 6 months.
But that doesn't talk about the interim, that's a temporary appointment of,
That's what interim is, right?
well, no, I mean, basically, you appointed Adam as a temporary town manager,
No,
but then you had an
we
interim.
appointed Marciello as an interim.
David Marciello.
Right.
On a 3-month contract.
Right.
Adam is the
Act-
assistant town manager, I think is the total, and therefore when Heather is away, he becomes the acting town manager.
Okay.
And we actually had that situation because when we made the decision to hire Heather, there was a delay, and Adam was appointed the acting,
Okay.
not the interim.
Right, right. I guess I was just asking because the language doesn't say interim, it just says temporary, so I didn't know. And that's why I was getting confused about who was which.
I mean, I guess the question is changing the word temporary to interim. We can think how that would work. And I guess the 3 months and the 3 months, the question becomes what happens if you haven't found somebody at that point? Clearly, I think this may have been trying to get at the 12-month point that you don't just keep pushing and make it so that you can finally appoint your friend.
Right.
But let's say we appoint her for 3 months. There's no reason why we can't appoint him for 3 months more later, and you for 3 months later, and you for 3 months. If you can't find someone, after the 6 months, you could just appoint a different person. That's how I read this.
Within the wording here, yeah, I think you're right.
But that way there, not one person is there for several years because you're dragging your feet.
Yeah.
Because it is difficult when you change over.
Right. But again, I think in a situation like that, we would turn to an acting town manager rather than an interim.
Right. So that's why maybe the interim needs to stay.
I think changing the word temporary to interim is fine, but we may also have room for acting, which is
Right.
a whole different...
I wouldn't be surprised if that doesn't, I think it says something about acting later on.
I think it does.
Yeah, that's why I
And
wasn't sure.
and
if
it's
it was
more a
in
function of going away for a week or whatever, as opposed to filling a vacancy. But I think there's wording there that we can work around.
Right.
What was the land use director's title for when he steps in? Who's
He was the acting town manager.
okay.
Was when he's appointed, but I believe he's the assistant town manager.
But he doesn't have to be the acting. She can appoint
Anybody.
because I know that she has on occasion appointed Chief Marino for a short period of time.
So, powers and duties, Chief Financial Officer for all town agencies. That will be clarified, I'm assuming, through some of the discussions, because currently Karen Roshu she's Chief Financial Officer, no, she's
Director of Finance.
Director of Finance, okay.
And the town manager remains CFO.
Okay, all right. Town manager shall be Chief Administrative Officer of the town, directly responsible to the Board of Selectmen for the administration of all town affairs for which the office of town manager is given responsibility by or under this charter. And then they list, but not intended to limit, supervise and be responsible for the efficient administration for all function activities for which the town manager given authority by charter, bylaw, town meeting vote, vote of the Board of Selectmen, vote of the school committee, or otherwise. So the school committee could delegate something to the town manager. Interesting. To structure, supervise, direct, and be responsible for the efficient coordination of all the fiscal and financial business of the town, including the school department, subject to the advice of the school committee and the Board of Selectmen. Has there been any duties transferred from the school to the town? They still have a business department in the school department?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just hired, although he's human resources, but he might do both. They just hired a business manager.
Okay. To recommend to the Board of Selectmen candidates to be appointed to the Board of Selectmen, Office of the Town Treasurer, Collector. This is the listing: Police Chief, Fire Chief, Director of Public Works, Building Inspector, Inspector of Wires, Plumbing Inspector. Candidates to be ratified by the Board of Selectmen to the Office of Professional Assessors. Candidates to be ratified by the Planning Board for the Office of Planning Director. We need to talk about the title. To appoint candidates to be ratified by the Board of Sewer Commission, Office of Sewer Business Manager. Provided, however, the provisions of this section shall apply to the appointment of any person under any other title who will perform as a result of any reorganization substantially similar duties. So the theory being is that these are department heads to be appointed by the Board of Selectmen. The treasurer and town collector, and the other candidates are appointed by the town manager but ratified by the Board of Selectmen. So one of the things I emailed out to the committee is a listing prepared by Elaine Peterson of appointments made by the selectmen or the town manager or some interaction between there. So not every position that's appointed in town is on there, such as the library director is not in there. This came up of looking at the various positions of whether that should be done differently. So for instance, the question we had last meeting was the Council of Aging Director is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Why isn't that like the department head up here? So that'll be something we'll come back and ask the input from the town manager of the various positions and where they really should be. And then the next paragraph actually talks about department heads, officers, members of boards and committees and employees for which no other method of selection is provided. And again, it's appointment subject to ratification by the Board of Selectmen unless they vote to reject the appointment. And the town manager to be in conjunction with the personnel committee, the personnel board, administration of the town personnel committee, personnel policies, practices, rules, including provisions for annual review, performance review, personnel bylaw, and collective bargaining agreements entered into by the town, and prepare and keep current a plan establishing the personnel staffing requirements for each town agency unless some other provision is made by law. Required to attend all regular and special meetings of the Board of Selectmen unless unavailable, and have a voice but no vote. So responsible for full and complete records of all the financial and administrative activities of the town are kept, and render as often as may be required by the Board of Selectmen, but not less than once in each year, a full report of all administrative and financial operations. And at the first session of the annual town meeting to give an oral report summarizing the financial condition of the town and recommending strategies to be followed during said meeting to enhance the fiscal condition of the town. To keep the Board of Selectmen fully advised as to the needs of the town and recommend to the town, other elected officials and agents for adoption of such measures requiring action by town meeting. Full jurisdiction over the rental and use of all town facilities and properties except for property under the control of the school committee, library trustees, and the Conservation Commission.
All right, so if the library trustees turned over any properties in control of the town, would that come out or would that stay there?
If they've
Or is it just
if
maintenance?
they've turned control over, then they no longer have control.
Actually, they might just have turned maintenance over. I'm trying to remember what the
The next sentence is, shall be responsible for the maintenance or repair of all town buildings and facilities placed under his.
I got a his
gender.
there.
Thank
That's
you.
our second his.
Controlled by this charter, bylaw, voter of the town or otherwise. So the question becomes, I don't believe we have done anything with the library building by vote, certainly not by bylaw. I guess or otherwise, if there was a vote by the library trustees to do it, that would be or otherwise. So we ought to find out whether the library has turned it over.
And Parks Department, they rent fields. I'm just mentioning it because the Parks Department rents fields.
Right, and actually the,
So are they not under the town manager, they're on their own?
Well,
So where it says
But it
full
says all
jurisdiction of
town
property.
facilities except.
so are we clear about what the Parks Commission does and what they don't do? They set the fees. Do they actually collect the fees and put them in an account somewhere and account for them financially? I don't think so. So they're not renting them. They're making the rules, they're making policy, but operationally, we're carrying out that policy under the jurisdiction of the town manager.
Okay. So it's fine.
And the maintenance is under the DPW.
I'm reacting to it.
I don't know.
And the maintenance is under the DPW, which
Is under the
is
town.
delegated from the town manager.
and was there a situation once where the Conservation Commission allowed for removal of, was it rocks or something? That basically there was a clearing of land, that somehow there was a monetary,
And that was town-owned land?
it was Conservation Commission land.
So the Conservation Commission is responsible for land on Hollis Road and Pleasant Street, where they rent out property. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know, I just remember it came up once that they were going to allow for the removal of gravel, I don't know. There was something there was a monetary thing involved that didn't seem to involve the town, it seemed to involve the Conservation Commission, and then they would use that money to,
In their revolving account,
yeah.
which is like the timber rights account for the town forest.
So is it then not considered town property, it's considered Conservation Commission property?
Except property under the control of the Conservation Commission. Yeah, so if there's a
Okay.
deed of property that has been deeded to the Conservation, they're in charge of it for all purposes.
Okay, so, and then the Parks just doesn't really have,
Well, Steve
Control.
raised the question,
Yeah.
should parks
Be in there.
mentioned?
Yeah, under 3.9 Board of Parks, it says day-to-day care and maintenance of the public parks shall be under the supervision of the town manager.
Via
It says
the
under
DPW.
supervision. Right.
Right.
And then this one is talking, oops, not going to get the right page, is talking about rental.
Rental and use, and then at the end it says, shall be responsible for the maintenance and repair of all town buildings and facilities placed under his or her control by this charter, bylaw, vote of town or otherwise. So the paragraph there for the parks says it's under the jurisdiction of the town manager
Right.
by charter.
okay.
So we're consistent there.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing it up so
Yeah, no,
that,
that's
you
good.
know,
And so that would be the same thing for sewer. The sewer says the day-to-day operation shall be under the town manager.
Right.
And the cemetery says day-to-day operation shall be under the town manager.
yep,
So, but a rental dispute between the Bengals and the school committee would be resolved by whom? With Parks?
So if the property is a school property, then it's the school committee. That's the question that we're trying to find out, is what is the property over there that the Bengals will be using? Is it school property or is it Parks property?
right, because just a little historically, the old concession stand, you know, the old one, the new one they built, I guess now, is Parks Department, but I believe is that school property, because it was the old bandstand that was there before that fell down. That's what, you know what, so that's why I'm bringing it up, because they rent out that facility, I believe. You have to get permission through the Parks Department to use that facility. I don't know if people pay, but I believe people pay price for it.
Okay. So
So-
clearly we need to have an inventory of all town property and then figure out who's, similar to this
Yes.
chart, as far as
Who's
who's responsible.
responsible for the rentals or the use or
Yeah.
whatever.
In maintenance.
And that will come up very important as we talk about the use of the center of town buildings. Because if someone, if the town hall is moved somewhere else, and then that building is used as a rental. So I think
We'll
we need to clear up.
We'll have that clear up as far as what's in practice, and then we'll see whether it matches the charter.
And here
Right.
it says maintenance and repair of buildings and facilities. I'm thinking of just, it doesn't say anything about property or land. So where we have something like the Wallace Park that was totally neglected, was that not a building or a facility? Was that just a wasteland? And who was charged with it? So I'm looking at it as, where does it say maintenance and repair or maintenance of?
I would say we should say town buildings, facilities, and land.
Because land's been a big...
So for instance, the
talking
library,
point.
who mows the lawn?
There was a
I think-
Facebook
I think-
problem, there was
I think we're-
unmowed lawn around Kids Kingdom,
Right.
and people were all, who
Right.
mows this lawn?
And that was actually the school department, and their mower is broken.
I think we should be careful not to get so granular and so specific. I think facilities is a broad enough term to say a park is a facility, it's a parks facility. So Wallace Park, it may have been neglected, but it's still a facility. I don't think we have to call it land.
I agree.
Well, I feel like it keeps coming up, the parks, the fields, the land, especially the Parks Department field.
Well, I think that if we get the inventory, we'll see who's going to actually be responsible, and that therefore Wallace Park is Park Department, maintained by town manager, and just get this list, and then we'll see whether this falls
Because I would want it to say the town manager is responsible for all town land, more broadly than anything. There shouldn't be anything that's not under
It
somebody's
says all
control.
town facilities and property. I think that says it.
It says buildings and facilities.
See, I've got a question of whether facilities includes land.
But property does.
Oh, yes, no,
Talking about the maintenance.
For the rental and use, yes, but for maintenance, and the thing is, people don't think they have to maintain land.
Right.
So I think that's part of the issue, and I think over the years, we haven't maintained land. Does that mean mowing? Does it mean...
And if we make that clearer, Wallace Park is a good example, then people know, okay, we have a concern for this piece of land, because they look it up and go, that comes under so-and-so, I need to go to so-and-so.
Right, and here's another example, Mark, is let's say the dirt patch where Old Public Safety was. That's nothing more than a piece of land that has not been maintained or dealt with since they removed that building. It could have become grass, it could have become a nicer parking lot for the Ritter.
Well, I think it also is just a question of clarifying the language in that particular, those two sentences, so that it's not town facilities and property in the first line and town buildings and facilities in the last line.
Yeah.
It should just be the same language.
Yeah, I don't know why there's two sentences.
Yeah, I don't know why it's different.
Because
Like
like something could fall through the cracks there.
Full jurisdiction over rental use of all town facilities and...
And property would cover
Yeah, full
everything.
jurisdiction over the rental, use,
And
And maintenance of.
and
That's it.
repair of all town facilities and property. Property includes land. That one,
Did-
just merge
Yeah.
merge
Like
those
two
two
mixed up
sentences.
Take out a whole
sentences that could
You
be
know,
all in one.
you know,
Got
the school committee, library trustees, conservation,
Because it's saying there's full jurisdiction over everything, but maybe some of it doesn't need to be maintained, which I think is what has happened.
including the last part as far as under control by this charter bylaw vote or by the town or otherwise.
Maintenance and repair.
I love how we do things end with or otherwise, I think so bad.
It's going back to that whole discretion part.
And other related duties, that's part of the sign.
So J, to repair and present, according to Article 6 in the annual operating budget, and a proposed capital outlay program for the 5 fiscal years next ensuing. To ensure a full and complete inventory of all property of the town, both real and personal, is kept, including all property under the jurisdiction of the school committee.
So we should be able to put our hands right on that inventory, Bob.
Should be an inventory.
Yeah, that would be so nice.
I make you bet there's actually, so we probably have an inventory, and we may not necessarily say who's
This may not be up to date.
Yeah, it's
We may
probably,
not have enough information.
I actually think we have it.
depends on what you count.
To negotiate all contracts, including any subject within jurisdiction of the Office of Town Manager, including contracts with town employees, except employees of the school department, involving wages, hours, and other terms and conditions of employment. To the acute chief, so she negotiates, but the Board of Selectmen approve the ones under our jurisdiction. So do we need to have anything under that, or is that under the Board of Selectmen language?
Under the, yeah.
I think it'd be nice if it says to negotiate it and then approved by. I feel like all other sections spell that out, that
Yes, and it could just say
Appointed by the
subject to the
ratified by
approval of the Board of Selectmen.
Executive chief policy, licensing, appointments, investigations. I wonder if there's a statutory, does she already have the authority to negotiate and approve?
Well, those stuff subject to MGL after that.
Yeah, so we'll find out on that. The town manager is the chief procurement officer, responsible for procuring all services, supplies, materials for all departments and activities of the town in the manner provided. And we'll have to make sure these are the correct laws. And shall examine, cause to be examined, the quality, quantity, condition of all supplies, materials, equipment delivered to or received by any town agency. It doesn't say that's not the school.
Who organized the old school equipment sales bidding?
School committee,
School committee.
I bet you.
No, I'm thinking it was.
'Cause,
John Londa did a lot of that. John
Yeah.
Londa was in charge of that, and he's under the school committee. So that would be surplus by a town agency.
Right, so...
That was not done by the town manager. So that's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, no, that's the question I have, is because usually they say except for the school, or except for
So-
whatever, so the question is whether that's included or not, we need to find that out. Provisions of these general laws, the charter, town bylaws, and other votes of the town meeting which require enforcement by the town manager or officers subject to the direction and supervision of the town manager are faithfully executed, performed, or otherwise carried out. So that's been part of my question, is who enforces the charter, who enforces the town bylaw? To inquire at any time into the conduct of office or performance of duties, any officer, employee, department, board, commissioner. So basically you get to ask questions. To attend all sessions of town meetings and answer all questions raised by voters, which relate to warrant articles and to matters over which the town manager exercises any supervision. Q, to reorganize, consolidate, or abolish, according to Article 5, town agencies serving under the supervision of the town manager in whole or in part, provide for new town agencies, and provide for a reassignment of powers, duties, and responsibilities among such agencies so established. Coordinate the activities of town agencies serving under the office of town manager and board of selectmen with those under the control of other officers and multi-member bodies elected directly by the voters, provided, however, for this purpose, the town manager shall have the authority to require the person so elected or the representatives to meet with the town manager at reasonable times for the purposes of effecting coordination and cooperation. That's where the attempt to have other elected officials cooperate and work with the town manager. Yes, to prepare and maintain long-term financial forecasts, including revenue expectations, future implications of operating budget program decisions, and capital budget programs related to infrastructure maintenance, improvement, and expansion. Infrastructure maintenance enough? I mean, you're going to be going over that for language to cover vehicles and not just buildings and streets. You may want to just look at that language. And then here's the catch-all: perform any other duties as are required to be performed by the town manager by town bylaws, the votes of the town meeting, or the votes of the board of selectmen.
So Bob, are you suggesting that the term infrastructure may not cover it?
Yeah, traditionally, to me, infrastructure,
Can be a whole lot of things.
just may need to clarify what that means, because quite often, I mean, a ladder truck's pretty expensive, but I wouldn't call that infrastructure. Some people might think the infrastructure, the capital infrastructure of the town is anything that's a capital item, but traditional
Right.
infrastructure has been buildings or a facility.
I think so, I'll look that up here.
And things,
Buildings, facilities,
Change-
roads, and things underneath the roads.
If you look at it from a different perspective, though, you wouldn't have a functioning town without the infrastructure of a public safety department,
Yeah.
fire department, police department, all of the vehicles and equipment that they need to carry out their function. You could look at that as necessary infrastructure to the functioning of a town.
The official definition, the basic physical and organizational structures and facilities, example, buildings, roads, power supplies needed for the operation of the society or enterprise. It doesn't say vehicles.
Sort of missing items, objects.
Yep. It doesn't say,
The other way you can deal with that is that once you buy a fire engine, it moves from capital to operating. And it does say she's responsible for the operating budget programs.
but it does in another spot say,
But the capital program to replace that, it's going to need to be replaced in 25 or 30 years.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a whole discussion about the capital plan later on.
So actually, if you go back, it's future implications of operating budget program decisions, and go and reading it differently, future implications of capital budget programs relating to infrastructure maintenance, improvement, and expansion.
I would change related to including, and you got it done.
another definition does say resources such as personnel, buildings, or equipment required for an activity. So I was just checking a couple of different sources. One of them does say equipment required for the activity.
Which is where I was coming
Yeah,
from.
that's why I was just checking, because it seemed odd that they said only buildings in that other one.
Well, it also said the organizational structure, so, that's
Right.
not something physical.
The other thing is, this says infrastructure maintenance, improvement, expansion. It doesn't talk about replacement.
Well, could you just say what they actually call it, future capital, put in there, and capital budget programs related to infrastructure maintenance and future just put in there?
So I think what this paragraph is not the capital budget itself.
It's the forecast.
It's the forecast for maintenance, improvement, and expansion of capital items. So it's sort of like, what's the future cost going to be to do operating and capital? But I think
No,
we're...
I think
So if you changed it to decisions and capital budget programs, including infrastructure maintenance, improvement, and expansion,
It still doesn't get to...
sure it does, it's a capital program.
well,
So let's think about the intent of this paragraph. It's developing a financial forecast that looks at the capital plan and what are the ongoing operating expenses associated with those capital items. Their maintenance, their improvement, their expansion. It may result in more capital, but it may also result in ongoing operating expense. And that's what we're trying to capture here. Long-term financial implications.
right, and then when she talks about improvement, or this talks about improvement and expansion, it's also talking about it meets the goals of the town. So if there's an economic development plan, and that's going to somehow involve something down the road. But I think it also just goes to say, for example, one of the things that we don't see in projections is making sure capital expenditure is keeping up with increases in operating expenditure, or as a percentage of the budget. Are we keeping up, and is that a priority for us or not? So it's all of that. It's balancing the capital with the current
I feel like anytime we get stuck on a sentence and everybody here has fault, it's got to be a bad sentence, because if
I'm
it's...
thinking, I was going to write.
If it's not making
clarify
sense
that.
to, I mean...
Town manager would have.
Yeah, the town
So
manager
then,
probably
you know,
is...
somebody just out there wants to learn about the
Yeah.
charter and they get to this sentence and it's...
But it also may also tie into the whole budgetary process,
Yeah.
because the budget comes from this.
Yeah, yeah. I would say when you meet with, as the finance committee with the town manager, and in fact, I'll give her copies of the notes.
Yeah, because she may, when she comes to the next meeting, then she may say, yeah.
What I was trying to get at was the context for this particular paragraph.
Right.
It's the financial forecast, the long-term financial forecast.
Yep.
It's not
Day-to-day.
capital planning, it's not
Not the operating budget.
the operating budget, it's long-term financial forecast, which has both an operating and a capital component to it.
Right. And, yeah,
And actually, then you could simplify it, saying the implication of operating budget and capital, operating and capital budget program decisions.
That's it.
You could just simplify it.
Get rid of the related to part,
Right.
because then it's
Right.
specifying some specific things that we're debating that don't need to be specified.
And leaving out others that may need to be included.
Right.
So it's more bland than it implies to everything.
That's right. I would agree.
Right, after related, it just made it confusing. It didn't need to be there.
Okay, 4.3, 4-3, delegation of authority. The town manager may authorize any subordinate officer or employee to exercise any power to perform any function or duty which is assigned to the office of town manager, provided, however, all acts performed under such delegation shall at all times be deemed the acts of the town manager. Acting town manager. Temporary absence. So just going back to the delegation, this is sort of the town manager says DPW, you're in charge of parks, you're in charge of sewer, you're in charge of cemetery, you're going to go do this. Acting town manager, by letter filed with the town clerk, the town manager shall designate a qualified town administrative officer or employee to exercise the powers and perform the duties of town manager during the temporary absence. During the absence, the Board of Selectmen may not revoke such delegation unless such 10 working days have elapsed, whereupon the board may appoint another qualified person to serve until the town manager comes back.
Seems reasonable.
Where this stuff came up earlier when we stopped and talked about temporary and interim, does it need to be in that part where it has its own section?
I think if you continue reading this section, you answer that question.
Plan temporary absence in the event of emergency absence, the Board of Selectmen may appoint a qualified town administrator to serve until the town manager shall return or the vacant is declared vacant. Any vacancy in the office town manager shall be filled as soon as possible by the Board of Selectmen, but pending such regular appointment, the Board of Selectmen shall appoint a qualified town administrative officer or employee to perform the duties of the office on an acting basis, which is different than an interim.
So one section is dealing with the appointment of the town manager, and this other section is dealing with the absence of the town manager.
So that's where you could choose just to do an acting person and not have an interim or a temporary, the way it says now.
Well, if you read this one, it says that your pool is qualified town administrative officers or employees on an acting basis.
Whereas the
An interim
could be
could be
outside.
outside.
Yeah.
But interim can only be 3 times 2.
That's right.
There's no
Right,
time limit here.
exactly.
And I think
Well, yes, there is, because it says 10 working days.
No, that's...
no, then you get to
Is that
see the
just temporary?
We're going to
vacancy.
go to C.
Go to
that's
C.
temporary absence, that's not vacancy.
That
Oh, okay, I see. I was thinking unplanned temporary absence, that it was...
So, and I think that I would probably move that whole section on the interim from here to underneath acting, and then have a section 4, make section 4, 5 interim.
although the interim part is under...
That's under the appointment.
Is under the appointment. Well, no, it's under town manager
Oh, right,
appointment,
right.
qualification and term.
Right.
And it's just like the second part of a
Which is
paragraph.
different from the town manager's duties and responsibilities.
Right.
which is the section we're in now.
So we've got two things. One, the earlier one says, any vacancy in the office of town manager shall be filled as soon as possible by the town manager screening committee. Here we say, any vacancy in the office of town manager shall be filled as soon as possible by the board of selectmen.
These two sections seem like they're covering the same thing differently.
Yeah.
I think they're covering two different things, but the wording is inconsistent.
But is it a different thing when your town manager's gone and you're filling it, or should it all be sort of covered as the same thing?
So this one,
So I go back to the situation we just went through, where we had an interim town manager. Once we decided to hire a new town manager, we had a gap, and we assigned an acting town manager.
But if you remember how we did that, the selection committee hired the interim. When the term was up,
The
the board hired an acting, or named an acting until we had a permanent.
That's right. That's exactly right.
No.
Two different committees.
The selection committee didn't hire the interim.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
no, the selectmen,
No, you're right. The board did.
Is there any reason to have two different ways to be filling the same moment?
yeah, see, it shouldn't be.
I disagree. I'm not a
Yeah.
lawyer, but you've got a section that deals with the appointment of the town manager, and a different section that's dealing with the duties of the town manager. And
Well, maybe the whole
You know,
notion
two
of
different
the vacancy needs to come out of the powers and duties of the town manager.
Yeah, I think that's
Because
the
the town,
problem.
because the town manager will not appoint for a vacancy.
Yeah, I think that's...
So if that language just comes out of the acting town manager, the temporary absence, yeah, the town manager makes that
Yes, because
appointment.
So-
they're not acting during their vacancy.
so I would argue that under powers and duties,
Mhm.
the town manager does have the ability to appoint an acting
Yes.
town manager in
Yes.
her absence.
Yes.
And paragraph C is clarifying that she does not have the authority to appoint an acting if she's not here. She's vacant.
So what
What do you do if it's vacant?
So what I would say is,
Somebody else
any
appoints it.
vacancy in the office of town manager shall be filled as provided in section 4.1, last paragraph, which is the interim process.
And you send them back to the process that was already established rather than...
So we would need to separate out a subparagraph here in reference to a specific subparagraph, because the rest of this section does not
Doesn't
apply.
apply, right.
So you have 4-1A,
Yeah. Or it clearly is the last paragraph of that section, but,
and that would be 4-1B.
yeah.
That I can live with.
So we just took away some role for the English teacher.
Well, until the town council comes in and says, no, it has to be
It's there for a
there.
reason, and that's okay. We're doing the English version right now.
Yeah,
We'll
yeah.
go back to the legal. 4.4-5, removal and suspension. The Board of Selectmen may, by a majority vote of the full board, at least it's consistent, terminate and remove or suspend the town manager from office in accordance with the following procedure. You have to adopt a preliminary resolution of removal by the affirmative vote of a majority of all its members, which is slightly different wording again, which must state the reason or reasons for removal. This preliminary resolution may suspend the town manager for a period not to exceed 45 days. A copy of the resolution shall be delivered forthwith to the town manager. Within 5 days after receipt of the preliminary resolution, the town manager may request a public hearing by written request with the town moderator filed with the town clerk. This hearing shall be held at a meeting of the appointing authority called by the moderator. The appointing authority is the Board of Selectmen.
Tim has a whole big thing in this section
got it back.
in his letter, and I wrote some notes on what he said to me about this.
Oh, this is where he was saying, you filed
It's the
with...
bottom. The language regarding removal of town manager needs attention. Where and how is a request for a hearing filed? Who shall call the meeting is prescribed. The charter is silent on the procedures of the meeting, the charter provides the manager to file a written response, but does not provide for actual hearing with the right to counsel or witnesses. And so,
Yeah.
this section just has a whole bunch of stuff that Tim thinks needs to be cleaned up so that there's this very specific who, what, where, when.
Process, yeah, I agree.
So,
So we'll try some language into that from the town moderator's proposal, and then this clearly needs to run by town council.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's true. Because I was going to ask whether or not we needed to specify by letter, by,
Yeah.
by mail, by certified mail, by,
Right. Pony Express.
Pony Express, email.
Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook, website.
Gotta get out on Facebook right away anyway, so there's no secrets in this town.
Okay.
So Board of Selectmen adopted final resolution removal. This is assuming we've had a hearing. It's got to be given to the town manager. If not requested public hearing, this assumes there's a public hearing. Town manager shall continue to receive a salary until the effective date of a final resolution of removal. The action of the Board of Selectmen in suspending or removing the town manager shall be final, it being the intention of this provision to vest all authority and fix all responsibility for such suspension or removal solely in the Board of Selectmen. Clearly, some of this is to clearly show we've got the appointment process, and this is the removal process, and it's contentious in various towns. When various towns have removed town managers, you want to have some clarity when it's over. But we need to make sure we have the proper safeguards.
Right.
Anything else on 4?
Sure, after I read through it, I was just curious. It doesn't say anywhere in there a town manager's responsibilities or role in communicating with the general public. And I just, because my experience is that she has, but just in sort of knowing what is her or their responsibility to maybe just follow up on a question somebody has about town beach, or, there's not any language anywhere in there on the public's ability to interact with the town manager. And if there was maybe a town manager that chose not to be interactive, would they have a responsibility to answer some of these questions about town?
So part of this goes to who is the face of the town, of an organization. Usually the CEO is. Is it the chair of the Board of Selectmen? Is it the Board of Selectmen? Is it the town manager? That's not addressed. And you have to understand that the charter, as originally adopted, had a chief administrative finance officer. It was not the town administrator, it was not the town manager, because we wanted to focus on the finance. That's shifted. And in many towns, the town manager is the public face in many ways. So the whole concept of communicating with the public, there must be language out there that we can start looking at.
There's nothing that establishes any relationship or responsibility to communicate or interact with anybody, not even just
communicate to the finance committee, communicate to town meeting, and not necessarily to the public. To the Board of
Participated in the Board of Selectmen
Right.
and at their meetings, but to the general public, I think, is the question.
You're right, right.
Because in terms of any open government, you just have a question about your town.
Yeah.
Is there a response required or not, or how?
And we can put in or delegate to the appropriate person, that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
yeah.
Can I just make one quick comment to interject? In the case of a natural disaster or something like that, the town manager is the first face of this town, as far as I understand, and then public safety under her, or under he.
That's a good question, because I thought that at that point,
I thought it was the fire chief.
I think the fire chief's in charge.
I think it's up to the town manager to appoint. the
Yeah,
fire
there's a person that's named, and right now, the person we have named is the fire chief, but I think it's done by the town manager,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. I'm not sure where that's covered, but I seem to recall that.
Okay. And so,
As an emergency,
so
whatever.
where does the power that we have, is that going back to any other positions not otherwise named? So,
I think it's a Board of Selectmen assignment. Isn't that something that you identify
I
when,
think it may be in the bylaw.
And it's the
when you go through the
9 years
list of
ago, they started
assignments
at,
of,
high school.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Nine
Those
years.
are women.
I think it's the same time you do the fence inspection.
so Emergency Management Director is appointed by the town manager, which is under the section, appoint all department heads, officers, members of boards for which there's no other method of selection is provided by the town charter. So that's along with fence viewer, as you said, public wares, animal inspector, tree warden, town forest committee, so. All right, so I think that answers that part. So it is the town manager who does it, so. And I think that communicating with the public is an important part. Anything else on 4?
Probably not. It probably actually just falls back to the Board of Selectmen and her response. But I'm looking at all of this stuff that everybody's going through with the, all of the charrettes and she's very involved in all of the planning and things like that. I don't know if there's, I know the economic development is just a big part of what you guys said that you wanted to do, and I don't know if there's a place that you wanted to put that. Or is it just addressing the, yeah, maybe it's just in addressing the goals and objectives of the Board of Selectmen, and that just encompasses it.
I think that those were the goals that we adopted for this year.
Yeah.
But I think this goes to the communicating with the public, that
Right.
would be appropriate language to say, communicate with the public about town manager activities, Board of Selectmen goals, you know, as appropriate. There's a lot of things that we can put in there, shall be in charge of.
When you go back to the beginning of section 4, the town manager shall be responsible for the coordination and direction of administrative and financial. I feel like so much of what she is doing or is going to be doing has something to do with communicating or involving. And is there something that goes there? Because here it feels like very specific things she's assigned in that first sentence. And then when we talk about all these other things she works on, like the website and things, I guess that's administrative, but how does it carry out
Well,
from
that's
in-house
also
to
a
the
meeting with
public?
her, communicating with people in the town is that's part of the whole website thing too.
Yeah, I think communication, we need to clarify that. Okay, I would say it's a good time to take a break from, not break, actually stop. And that we talk about Article 5 next time.
Is it pretty official that we're not doing this for spring?
I think so.
I think it's realistic not to.
Because I was starting to feel like there was just no possible way to get it organized.
Not
I think our goal should be to have it done by the spring, basically done. Then we can do the legal, we can do the English, getting the information out over the summer, the fall, and then any contentious points, we decide we're going to leave it in, or this is just too difficult, we're taking this out, so that, because this is an accept or not.
Yep.
There's no amending.
And it sounds like cemetery wanted to know what the process was. I feel like if we can communicate immediately now what our schedule or process is, then people will understand better what.
But we need to have it pretty much done, I would think, by the spring.
Yeah.
We
What's
should
good?
make a timeline
What's
of what we expect from ourselves.
That's a good idea. Do you want to take a shot at that since you run it?
I'll look at the calendar
Yeah,
and
why
I'll
don't you
try
do
to
that?
make what
The
would
good
be
thing
the
about
timeline.
not doing it for town meeting is we don't have to get it done by March.
Because
We actually can say we want it completed, mostly completed by the end of April. Then that basically says, okay, here's what the story is. Okay.
I would only submit that time is of the essence, and if we don't treat it as such, we risk losing momentum.
Yeah.
And then not only do we miss annual town meeting this year, but we miss special town meeting opportunity in the fall. And the next thing you know, we're here a year from now, wondering if we're going to make it for ATM.
No, that's why I think we need a timeline to say that we intend to finish it for October or November, and these are the things we'll do so that we know that that happens. I just don't think we can do that.
I don't think we should throw in the towel yet.
I don't either.
I think time is of the essence. I think we need to do what we can to gather the information, to not make it more complicated than it needs to be. We're going through this with a fine-tooth comb. Katie made the point at a previous meeting that we need to be careful. The more far-ranging the changes are, the more difficult it's going to be to pass. Also, the more difficult it's going to be to put anything forward.
But we can only do it once every 10 years, and I wouldn't want to miss the chance to make it really, I mean, because there's little editing problems in here that I feel like shouldn't be in there.
Yeah.
Like it should be
Maybe
very
good.
pure and...
So I would say if we aim to have all committee reports back with initial feedback by the end of our second meeting in January. That basically says February is when we really start working on what are the things that we want.
Right, and if any of those committees that we've talked to have any particular language stuff, again, like the Cemetery
Yeah.
Commission, submit in writing what, like here's your section and what's your, track your changes.
So we're starting to work on the schedule. So the end of January, we've got reports from all the different committees and all the entities, which then February, we then actually start taking votes and actually write the substance. March, initial legal review.
But then the public hearing part, and then trying to bring the public in when everything else is
So-
happening, like you said, at the budget time. I feel like...
So April would be the public. So this is the tight timeline. We
Okay.
can start the timeline. We can just see what happens. And each month we'll do an
I'd like to have
assessment.
it basically done by May, April, May. I just don't know, because of the warrants and the timelines for all the paperwork for a town meeting.
So I feel like a couple committees are just starting to get into it.
Yeah.
And they're going to need to wait for their meetings so that they can meet and then figure out what they need to ask from it. I mean, we can try, but I don't see...
The other thing would be if you can talk to the town clerk and just ask what is the typical time when we'd actually have to have an article ready based on last year's town meeting. Just get a date, and then we can back that into this. and
Because
see
it
if
would even
it's-
have to be completely done 30 days before to be part of a warrant for the...
I can tell you roughly the date,
Okay,
April 5th,
April 5th.
30 working days? We have a calendar meeting.
more or less. That's about when the
Town
warrant
meeting
goes
is-
out.
They'll probably want to be on Cinco de Mayo Day, right? May 5th.
Town meeting
Is that a
is
Saturday?
scheduled
Yeah.
for May
So
5th.
So it'll be a
So
special town
1,
meeting.
2, 3, 4,
1, 2, 3, 4. So Friday, April 6th.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Did I do that?
15.
Yeah, Friday,
There's a
April
holiday.
6th. Maybe Monday, April 9th, the warrant goes out. Or at least goes to press, no later than April 9th.
And then we could have a snow day meeting.
It's gonna, it's nice to keep working on it, but I'm not sure whether we'll be able to get there. But let's try.
The other thing is you don't have to wait till the very final product before you start getting public input. You can do that along, once it's,
But even when we take public input during a meeting, that's when we can't even meet to actually continue to create. It'd be nice to get it done. I just honestly, kind of like, can I get everything done in time for Christmas? Probably not, but I will. So maybe we can.
Amazon
Well, with Christmas, you just
It's
run
our
out of time.
deadline.
Amazon Prime.
Hit it up again today. Ruining local
That's not an
economy,
that's
but I
not
won't
an
go there.
Same here.
Okay, so speaking of which, our next regular scheduled meeting is Wednesday, December 27th, 2 days after Christmas. Are we going to meet? I'm available.
If we're doing our fast timeline, yes.
Okay, well, let's meet and let's plan on the 27th.
But I don't keep it away.
And then the January meeting, we already, we have January 10th and 24th.
I think the 10th is when we invite the town manager. You may want to confirm that or make it official or something. I told her to say the date, but I didn't invite her.
And so I'd say if the cemetery wants to come, it'd probably be the 24th,
Okay.
because we really should devote the entire 10th to the town manager. Okay. Any comment from the public?
So,
Any comment from the board?
No?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Happy holidays.